Both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.
Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Before they can count votes, candidates have to count dollars as they steer through the fundraising portion of their campaign. We'll examine the money flow as well as some of the emerging issues in the New Orleans mayor election. A new report suggests the possibility of lead in water pipes near construction areas. We'll take a look. We'll also delve into history as a downtown office building with a rich history in Black business and social life is refurbished. And we will hear from the author of a book about John Schwegman, who pioneered in politics and the grocery business. At the counter for us are tonight's Informed Sources. Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources. Tyler Bridges, reporter, New Orleans Advocate. David Capello, author of the book, The People's Grocer, John G. Schwegman, New Orleans and the Making of the Modern Retail World. And Jeff Adelson, reporter, The New Orleans Advocate. We're going to go over to Tyler first. We're going to go over to Jeff first. I'm sorry, I got that one confused. You first, Jeff. And we're going to talk about the money that goes into the campaigns for mayor to keep those campaigns going. And so they've been raising funds. Some are getting a little bit more than others. What are we finding out?
Quite a bit more, in fact. So we had one of the first campaign finance reports early this week, and Desiree Charbonnet really dominated those reports. This is the first time campaign finance reports have been done since qualifying, although some of the last-minute entries they didn't file. Charbonnet, however, is really overwhelming the field at this point. She's got she raised $870,000 since she got into the race. That's more than
in 2 months.
In 2 months,
that was before qualifying. She started before qualifying.
Correct. Yeah. And that's more than 5 times what her nearest competitor raised in the same point, and that was LaToya Cantrell.
That is definitely a considerable lead. So what are the sources of all of these campaign funds?
So Charbonnet was able to tap into a lot of donors with pretty deep pockets that were able to do the maximum $5,000 donation. A lot of them are city contractors, restaurateurs, business owners, that sort of thing. So she's obviously got a pretty strong lead at the moment. The question is, a lot of people are still seen as really holding back at this point. They wanted to see what was going to happen during qualifying. They weren't sure the field was set and didn't want to commit to a single candidate. So there's a good possibility that over the next month we're going to see a lot more funds flowing into any of the campaigns, whether Charbonnet continues to benefit from and be the lead in that field, or whether some go to Cantrell, Bagneris. Both Troy Henry and Tommy Vassell have been seen as people that might potentially be able to get in on some of that fundraising. We'll see.
My experience in covering races is if you can establish a good lead and how much you raise, that makes more people want to encourage to give you even more. So that's a really good start in terms of for Charbonnet, and she'll probably be trying very hard to build on it and to say to potential big donors, hey, those other guys or candidates don't have much of a chance, give me the money.
There's many layers to Black culture and community life in New Orleans. And the Charbonnet family is an old New Orleans family. There's the what used to be called the Black Creole type of Charbonnets. The family has been in politics. They're well established. They've been business people and just well known. And some of the old political organizations, remember back when we had Bold and Coup and all of those, that they were involved with this. So this is a family with a lot of name connections, business connections and political connections. And so its politics, its inherent politics, is a lot different than a lot of other candidates. And that's a big advantage. I mean that's a good starting point to have.
For fundraising, certainly. I mean, do we anticipate any outside money coming in?
Outside money in terms of
outside
from
of the
other,
city and outside of, you know, real New Orleans interest.
I think we're starting to see that some with you know, different groups that have interests in the city that, you know, may be from outside. The one that comes to mind, there have been some donations from a PAC associated with Airbnb. Some of these other, you know, largely money comes from business interests. So a lot of that is sort of where the sources are coming from.
You know, the governor's race of 2015 was the first time we saw in Louisiana, thanks to the Citizens United Supreme Court decision, the super PAC money. And while Jeff mentioned there's a $5,000 limit of how much an individual or an individual entity can give to a candidate, someone can create a super PAC, as we saw in the governor's race of 2015, then the Senate race of 2016, and pour unlimited amounts of money into that super PAC, and really could have a big difference. We don't know yet, right. Whether that will happen, but that is, I think, the outside influence that really could swing things.
We don't know about outside PACs. One of the things we do know is that Mayor Mitch Landrieu has his own PAC, which is obviously not got the same kind of resources or funding of some of the ones you're talking about.
But Sidney
has created his own PAC, and both of them have pledged that they're going to be very active in this campaign, and neither of them has really said where that money, who that money is going to go to support, or who that money is going to go to attack. So
anyway, we're just getting started with the campaign and with the campaign funding too. So it's something that we'll certainly keep track of.
In the case of Landrieu's PAC, and maybe to a certain extent Sidney Torres's, that the good news is that you get their money, but to some people that would be a negative, at the same time. So that can go, it can cut both ways.
Okay, let's go over to Tyler now and focus on just the candidates themselves and what they have to do to distinguish themselves. That's
a great question, Marcia, because if you listen to what they say, they talk about on the single most important issue, crime, they really don't say anything different than the others. They're all saying that we need more police officers. They're all saying that we need more community policing. They're all saying we need to create more jobs. It's really not clear how they would exactly do it, especially Mitch Landrieu has tried very hard to increase the ranks in the police force. And all of that will cost more money, and none of them have explained how they would pay for that. So I'm very curious, and I know Jeff will be too, in the reporting is to see exactly how do they distinguish themselves and come up with real plans rather than just platitudes.
Well, what are some of the things that they're saying at least at this point? I know one thing is with LaToya Cantrell was the issue of the traffic cameras, and she's kind of flip-flopped on her position on them. So what is she settled on now?
So her position now, and her campaign would say, was always intended to be that once she takes office, or if she takes office, I guess, she would completely suspend the use of traffic cameras in the city, and that would be subject to a study that would look at whether they're effective at reducing crashes and increasing safety. And if the study came back and said they don't really have much of an effect, that she'd do away with the program entirely. Now that's a pretty big budget hit for the city. The cameras bring in millions and millions of dollars. And so she announced this plan the other night when she was laying out her platform, and then in an interview with a couple of reporters afterward, she seemed to walk it back and say she really was only talking about the new cameras that Landrieu installed over the past year. And then the next day, when the news that came out that she had said that, the campaign went back and said, no, we're talking about all the cameras. So it's a little bit of a rocky start for a policy that probably a lot of residents would be in pretty strong support of.
Yeah, and she's saying about fewer cameras, which, as Jeff noted, brings in more money. At the same time, she's saying that she wants to spend more money on anti-crime efforts.
Right, and one thing we haven't heard really from Cantrell's campaign is where the money for any of her initiatives is going to come from. She's pledged, as have all the other candidates, that they won't raise taxes for their platforms. But really, for the most part, a lot of the candidates have been very vague on how you make up or increase the amount of money the city's
well,
getting.
I did see in Charbonnet's crime prevention plan, she does talk about redirecting some taxes.
She talks about
She outlines
redirecting,
a few, and then she also calls on spending less on the monitors for the police consent decree. That's where she thinks we could save some money. So does Cantrell have an idea of how she'd make up that money that would be lost from traffic camera revenue?
Cantrell said that she's arguing that she can fund a lot of the changes she's proposing, particularly in public safety, with what she's calling a scrub of the budget, which is a pretty common thing for candidates to say. They'll look through, make sure there's nothing that's going toward...
how many candidates have we heard say that over the years, scrub the budget?
So you're looking at how the candidates are trying to distinguish themselves. So we're going to be seeing something that you're writing about that in the near future, is that?
And Michael Bagneris, by the way, has come out with the first campaign ad of the mayor's race. And there are, you talk to the political pros, as particularly Jeff and I do, and they will all pretty much agree that there are three major candidates: Desiree Charbonnet, LaToya Cantrell, and Michael Bagneris. Then the question is, all right, Troy Henry, businessman and an engineer from Stanford, does he qualify as among the top tier? Generally, the political pros say not yet. Frank Skurlock, he's the white businessman, and I think the race is important to note, who's had a lot of success and says he's going to put a lot of money in the race. Do you consider him as a top tier candidate? The political pros say no. And there's another African American businessman, Tommy Vassell. Does he qualify? Again, the political pros say he's really not top tier yet.
But as you said, yet. The word is yet. We're just starting with the campaign.
Yeah,
so
remember the primary is October 14.
Right. Okay, thanks a lot. We're going to go over to David now. And David has authored a book about a guy who was really a New Orleans cultural icon in many ways. Who many of us grew up with going to his grocery stores. He really did impact the New Orleans culture and also politics in Louisiana. And it's about John Schwegman, the People's Grocer. And David, you just are coming out with this book. So what did you find out about John Schwegman?
Well, I found out that he was very important to the local culture, and lots of people will remember Schwegman and have an identification with him emotionally and culturally. But I also found out that he had a larger dimension, that he paved the way for what we see today in retailing, which is basically the big box phenomenon and the discount phenomenon. As I found out, discounting used to be illegal. There was a 30-year period from about 1930 to 1960 where there was this phenomenon called fair trade laws, and it was basically price fixing by manufacturers. And John Schwegman was the main warrior against these fair trade laws. And he actually took a case to the Supreme Court in 1951, and it was the first devastating blow to these.
And so as a result, he was able to sell groceries at a cheaper price. I mean, that's what it was known for. People would go to Schwegman's and they'd have savings, and while they were making their groceries, and then his stores got to be a lot more than just groceries. You could do a whole lot of things there.
That's the whole thing. He really paved the way for this what's called super centers in retail jargon, and hypermarkets in retail jargon. A full generation before Sam Walton came out with the same thing.
But there is a theory that he influenced Sam Walton, that Sam Walton came to New Orleans and saw it and was very much influenced by what he saw.
Yes, there is that theory. I've never been able to actually prove it or document it, but there's some circumstantial evidence.
But wasn't there also a celebrated case with milk, that he wanted to buy milk from Mississippi,
yes,
which was cheaper but illegal to do in Louisiana?
Yes.
And he was ultimately able to do that?
Yes, he was able to do that until the milk company mysteriously shut down.
Okay.
And since we're talking about politics here, tonight. I got to mention that. Remember the paper bags that you would get when you'd go to Schwegmann's, and there would be the endorsements, the endorsed candidates by Schwegmann. I mean, how unusual is that?
Yeah, very unusual. Like no one has ever done it but him.
But yeah, he was certainly a guy who would not back down from a challenge
Right.
or from an idea. And I mean, so you had a political endorsement on a grocery bag. I mean, it was part of life here.
Well, he was such a fighter. He took his fight against price fixing, and he was so into fighting these causes, sometimes lost causes, that he went into politics in the second half of his career, and that's where he was known for a long time.
So he's kind of a people's champion, populist sort of guy. But he also, as I recall, opposed the Superdome when that was being built.
Yes.
And I think that kind of caused a bit of a backlash.
Yes, that's one of the reasons. I mean, his reputation really fell into oblivion, I thought, because he did things like that. He was really against the Superdome.
Yeah.
He ran for governor and came in last and things like that.
But his son, John Schwegmann Jr., ran for the Public Service Commission, which is, of course, a regulatory commission. At the time was very young, had no political experience, and won easily. And so that showed the clout. And there was this period between 92 and 96 when John Schwegmann Jr. was Public Service Commissioner, and his wife, Melinda, was Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
So talk about the ultimate power couple.
Oh, totally.
Okay, the Public Service Commissioner and Lieutenant Governor. She was the first woman to be elected Lieutenant Governor.
Yes.
And ran for governor and did decently. I think
She ran for governor in 1995. Yeah. Actually, she didn't. She was really one of the also-rans. I remember.
Well, with her it was that Mary
race.
Landrieu ran also, and so they kind of split up the women's vote in that race. But it was the ultimate power couple, and then it just all went away.
Yeah, it all started fizzling around 1995 when she ran for governor. But that's when John Francis Schwegmann. This book is about John Gerald Schwegmann, and they don't use first, second, or third. They just use middle names. And so,
well, back to John Gerald and the grocery empire that he established, even before the entering into politics. You said that one thing that really has touched you is in going out and doing the research and talking to people, is that there are so many people who were impacted by him, were touched by him, not only because they could make groceries cheaper, but they worked for him.
Yes, I find so many people coming up at book signings saying that they worked for him. Some people like, yes, I worked a summer as a bag boy, or or I was a manager for him for 20 years. All sorts, everything in between.
So the book is The People's Grocer by David Cappello, about John Schwegmann, who so many of us remember going to his grocery stores. Remember the man and remember his empire. So thanks a lot for joining us, David.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go back over to Jeff right now. And a really important report came out this week from the New Orleans Inspector General. And this is about lead in the water pipes getting into our water supply, and it's really sort of connected to road work that's going on. And there was a warning from the IG.
Right. So the IG's report is focused on the danger of lead in the pipes, and it's probably important to note that they weren't doing testing. They weren't saying that there's a problem per se, high levels of lead that they've found or anything like that, although they are very concerned about the lead levels in the city. What the Inspector General's report focused on was research that shows that road work, even if it doesn't touch the pipes themselves, the vibrations from that work can shake loose flakes of lead that are in the water system and would normally be not a problem because there's coatings and corrosion controls on the pipes that keep it from getting into the drinking water. But the vibrations can shake that loose. That can mean that residential properties, other properties that use the water supply, can get lead in them just because someone's jackhammering a few feet away.
And of course, the city's embarking now on, a street repair, which is, sorely needed, but it's going to be all over the city. And so the IG in preparation for that, has asked the Sewage and Water Board to please alert people more.
That's really the main message of the report. The IG is saying, look, we're getting $2.4 billion of road work. A third of the streets in the city are going to be touched by this. And the Sewage and Water Board, they argue, needs to be doing a better job going door to door if they have to, putting door knockers, mailers, things like that to let people know, hey, this road work's going to go on. We don't know what it's going to do to the pipes. The Sewage and Water Board doesn't even have a comprehensive inventory of where the lead pipes are in the system. So they're basically saying people need to know about all these uncertainties out there and need to know about the precautions that they may need to take to protect themselves. The IG also wants a more proactive approach from Sewage and Water Board in terms of providing residents with either filtration systems or funding to go to pipes on their property that may have lead in them and dig them up and replace them with other materials. That's more of a long-term thing.
Because that's an issue also. I mean, the Sewage and Water Board and also the IG is calling upon the city and the Sewage and Water Board for better communication in this regard. But the Sewage and Water Board can take care of what's on public property, but they can't go onto private property and do anything about that if you've got the old lead pipes.
Right. The Sewage and Water Board argues, and this is a position the city's taken on a number of different things, that they can't do anything on private property because of a state constitutional prohibition about using public funds for private benefit, essentially. The IG's response is basically, yeah, you should get some clarification on the law, but this is a public health situation. There's all sorts of negative health effects that come from lead exposure, particularly in children that viewers probably know. It's been linked to decreased IQs, increased inability to concentrate, and sometimes violence. So what they're saying is, look, this is a real public health issue. We need to get these pipes up. We need to get people the protections they need, and they need to know when and where work is happening that could affect them.
Jeff, I applaud the Inspector General for issuing this report. It's very important. But just to be technical about it, is this an expanded role for the Inspector General? This is not something that you really hear from Inspector Generals giving what amounts to like consumer alerts.
It is an unusual topic for them to tackle. I think most people are used to the IG dealing with more dollars and cents kinds of issues. This came up, and we have some very world-renowned experts in lead issues here in New Orleans. And this came up because of a report the IG was planning on doing about whether Sewage and Water Board is doing the appropriate types of tests to check on the water supply. They're meeting all federal requirements, but there's a lot of people, particularly within the city, that study the issue of lead that say the federal laws are a little too lax. They need to be, the Sewage and Water Board needs to be going far beyond what those require. So in the course of researching a report on whether those recommendations should be followed, the IG sort of came across this issue, and when you talk to the Inspector General, he says, look, we felt this was such an important thing, even though it wouldn't not necessarily be what we normally do. We're about protecting citizens. We're about public health. And they point out Sewage and Water Board is one of the largest agencies, is almost as large as the city itself in terms of its budget and its
in interviews,
reach.
the Inspector General has said this is really probably the most important report that they actually have released.
Yeah.
But in response, the Sewage and Water Board is saying we are communicating issues to the customers. If we know we're going to be in there doing work, we're letting them know about this.
They do, and the big distinction here is the Sewage and Water Board does issue alerts well ahead of any scheduled work on the pipelines themselves. What the Inspector General is saying is, that's great, and the Sewage and Water Board is doing, getting better at this, but they really need to be doing alerts when, even if the pipes aren't involved in the road work, if the pipes could be affected by this.
Okay, all right, thanks a lot, Jeff.
Just a quick thought. I'll tell you, I'm going to be drinking filtered water at home, not the tap water
that's
anymore.
an issue too, where you can get filters and do filtered pitchers, et cetera, stuff like that. We'll talk about this another time. I got to move on over to Arrow right now, and there's a really significant building that has been refurbished.
This is a really
Loyola.
feel-good story, a building on Loyola Avenue, right across from the library at Loyola and Gravier. It was known for most of its existence existence, the Pythian Temple. The Pythians, way back when, was a men's fraternal organization. There was actually two Pythians groups back started in the 1860s. One was essentially the white Pythians, and the other was the black Pythians. And they worked pretty much like a Masonic organization did. And the building here was built by a man whose name was Green, who was black, who actually as a kid had been a slave, and became a very, very successful businessman. It built this building, which at the time was really hailed nationally as the most important building within black culture in the United States. It's a nice building. And at its time, it became a really active place, especially for the black community. It had a roof garden on top. It had a theater on the second floor. All kinds of stories, including one of my favorite, that is in 1909, there was a group that was playing there, and the play they were doing was called something like "There Never Was a King Like Me," and it was about a character named Zulu. And there were a group of men who lived in that neighborhood. They were like a carnival group, and they called themselves the Tramps. And they were there, and they saw this, and they became enamored by this character called Zulu. So they went back, and they changed the name of their group to Zulu. So that was the origin on the second floor of that building. It is being converted now into a 69 apartment unit, sort of like middle income level. Ground floor will have groceries, and it's really just be a real asset to the community. It was also the building where Homer Plessy worked when he worked for an insurance company. And so it is so rich in black culture. It went under in the 1940s because of the Depression. After the 1940s, it came back as like a building for Higgins Enterprises. And this is where he did all the hiring in terms. So this building is just so rich with history.
Right.
And they've restored it. For many years, they had sort of like this screen over it. They took it
metal,
away.
metal siding type of stuff,
it was made ugly. And now it's a very handsome building, and it's just good to see.
It's really a welcome return of a really, really beautiful piece of architecture, and also a significant place in our history, in the history of the city of New Orleans, with so many people and so many big names who've gone through those doors and in those halls. Okay, time to look ahead. Errol.
In Jefferson Parish, there's a council election. This is a whole chain reaction. It goes back to Mike Guiney being elected mayor, and then Zahn, who was held that district seat, got Mike Guiney's mayor seat. Mike Guiney was elected council president. Anyway, Denny Martini versus who's council chairman versus Dominic Impostata, who's a Kinnick councilman, and they'll be in a special election.
Okay, Tyler.
Yeah, continue to look at the mayor's race. So we're just finishing the first week after qualifying. The field is now known. And then the second week, let's see what the candidates are doing again as they try to distinguish themselves in the run-up to the October 14th primary.
All right, David.
Yes, we'll be doing a birthday celebration, 106 birthdays, finally commemorating him. On August 12th in the Bywater and in various places.
All right, great.
And also, I'll be at the Jefferson Parish Main Library on August 31st.
All right, very good. Thanks a lot, David.
Well, anyone who wants to know more about campaign finances in the election should keep an eye out this weekend. My colleague Jessica Williams is going to have a comprehensive look at who's giving to whom and what that might mean.
Okay, in the Advocate, right?
In the New Orleans Advocate.
Best paper.
Certainly a good paper. A welcome addition to the city. All right, thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.
The firm of Bowen, McLeod and Britt helps both large corporations and small businesses with insurance, risk management, and employee benefits using the same values they've held true for over 30 years: knowledge, vision, accountability, and service. More information is at bmbinc.com.